Major themes in the Book of Esther. The Book of Esther presents a rich theological narrative that reveals God's sovereign involvement in history, even when His presence is not explicitly named. Through carefully ordered events and faithful human action, the book demonstrates how God preserves His people, fulfills His promises, and brings justice to those who trust in Him. One of the most striking themes in Esther is God's sovereignty and providence. Esther's rise to queenship appears at first to be the result of political circumstance, yet it ultimately serves a greater purpose. Mordecai's discovery of a plot against the king seems insignificant at the time but becomes crucial later in the story. The king's sleepless night, which leads to Mordecai's public honor, marks a turning point in the narrative. These events collectively demonstrate that God governs even the smallest details to accomplish His will. Closely related is the theme of God's covenant faithfulness to His people. Haman's decree threatens the total destruction of the Jews, to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all the Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, Esther 3 verse 13. Despite this dire threat, the Jews are delivered, confirming that God's promises cannot be undone. Mordecai's confidence that deliverance will come reflects trust in God's enduring faithfulness. The ultimate preservation of the Jewish people affirms that God remains true to His covenant, even in exile and danger. The theme of courageous obedience is embodied most clearly in Esther herself. Approaching the king without being summoned carried the penalty of death. Nevertheless, Esther resolves to act, declaring, "And if I perish, I perish." Esther 4 verse 16. Her courage is rooted in a willingness to place obedience above self-preservation. Mordecai's words, "Who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" Esther 4 verse 14, frame Esther's role as a divinely appointed responsibility, calling her to faithful action at a critical moment. Esther also highlights the interplay between divine sovereignty and human responsibility. Mordecai assures Esther that deliverance will come even if she remains silent, yet he warns that she and her household will not escape the consequences of inaction. This tension underscores that while God's purposes will prevail, individuals are still accountable for how they respond to God's call. Esther's decision to act shows that human obedience is often the means through which God accomplishes His plans. Another major theme is the reversal of fortunes through divine justice. Haman, who plots the destruction of the Jews and prepares gallows for Mordecai, ultimately dies on the very gallows he constructed. In contrast, Mordecai is honored publicly by the king and elevated to a position of authority. These reversals demonstrate that pride leads to downfall, while faithfulness leads to exaltation, affirming that God brings justice in His time. Intercession and advocacy are also central to the book. Esther pleads for her people before the king, saying, "If I have found favor in your sight, O king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request." Esther 7 verse 3. Her intercession is preceded by a call to fasting among the Jews, indicating dependence on divine intervention. Through Esther's advocacy, the people are granted the right to defend themselves, leading to their deliverance. The book further emphasizes that God uses ordinary individuals to accomplish extraordinary purposes. Esther is an orphan Jewish woman living in exile, and Mordecai is a gatekeeper rather than a prophet or priest. Yet God uses their faithfulness and integrity to bring about salvation for an entire nation. Their lives testify that God's work is not limited by social position or status. Finally, the establishment of the Feast of Purim highlights the importance of remembering God's deliverance. The Jews are instructed to commemorate these events annually, that these days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation. Esther 9 verse 28. Purim serves as a lasting reminder of God's saving power and faithfulness, encouraging gratitude, generosity, and joy among God's people. In summary, the Book of Esther reveals a God who is sovereign yet works through human obedience, faithful yet often unseen, just yet patient in His timing. Through providence, courage, intercession, and remembrance, the narrative affirms that God preserves His people and accomplishes His redemptive purposes, even in the midst of danger and apparent silence.